Mark, welcome to dopeYEAH.
There was drums in the house, like both me and my brother, always like playing drums as loud as we possibly could. I never was like, my dad or mum would never be like, shut up. I'd never really considered myself, oh, I'm gonna be an artist. It was just like happened by accident really. But yeah, I always knew that I was into music. It wasn't until this project, modelman, where, you know, I actually felt like, oh, maybe I've got something to say. Okay, I've come from this like classical piano background, but I'm also really into dance music. Like, what would happen if like I actually merged those two worlds and tried to do something with that? And so that was when modelman came about. It was like, okay, right, well, I guess I'm an artist now.
Mark, welcome to dopeYEAH. You've never been here before.
First time, yeah. Stunning location. Can't believe it. I'm sort of a little bit overwhelmed actually.
So what did you expect? I mean, I did big it up. I mean, I bigged it up to Christian, your manager, but
yeah, Christian said that it was almost like a museum in a way, but this just amazing creative space. And I didn't really know what to expect, but like everything, you know, from the architecture to the contents of like the space is sort of kind of takes your breath away.
And it's kind of hard to explain it to people. You say, look, it's a radio museum, and it's like, look, it's not stuffy, just check it out, it'll blow your mind. If you're into sound, it's just the most extraordinary place. Just
seeing like how sound was reproduced early on as well, like in like the 1800s or whatever, or early 1900s. It sort of, it makes you appreciate how easy it is for us to listen to music now, but it also, you know, I'm trying to like put myself in the shoes of those like people, like where they were listening to music reproduced for the first time. It must have been quite amazing.
And listening to the same song over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I think the other thing about it is they're so beautiful, the pieces. You know, the detail, you know, the attention to detail is so beautiful in all the pieces. Like throughout, that's what I kind of thought, like the amount of energy that was put into that besides making it a functional item is actually really beautiful to look at.
Yeah, I mean, just looking around even in this room, it's just, there's so many stunning pieces, isn't there? And you sort of think, oh wow, the skill that's gone into like making this is just unbelievable, like engineering and all the little details. Yeah, it's incredible.
And you did a show last night at Metronome, so how did that go?
Yeah, Metronome. I didn't know what to expect. First time here in Prague. The people just amazing, like really, you can just tell straight away everyone's really into their music here, and it's a really important part of their lives, and that's great for me because, you know, music's everything to me. So to come to a place like, you know, Prague and perform at Metronome was just an incredible experience. You know, people were really into it. I was actually the last on. So I didn't know, you know, if anyone was going to be there at that point, because it was like 3 a.m. So I thought, oh, most people are going to be heading back home or whatever. But there was still people there rocking out, so it was great.
Amazing. So do you think there's a difference between a Prague audience and a London audience?
Yeah, definitely. I think depending on what environment you're in, because context. You know, like say for example, if I'm like a hard ticket sale and people are coming specifically to see me, I've had like amazing experiences in London where people have bought tickets, and like I've sold out a venue, like played the Colour Factory over there, and it was incredible. So I've only played like 3 or 4 shows in London, and they've all been really good. But here, obviously, you know, I don't think like many people yet know of modelman. Like there's definitely a few people singing along, so there was definitely some people. So I think this is coming here has been important for me to just kind of get my foot in the door and like let people of Prague know like, hey, I'm modelman, and hopefully they'll like welcome me and listen to my stuff, and I'll be able to come here again.
It's I think the great thing about Prague is the lack of cynicism. And you know, obviously London. We both come from London. It can be a tough town. But here, people give you a chance. You know, they'll give you a moment. You know, okay, you suck, but they will give you a chance to prove yourself, and they'll be open to it.
Yeah, you know? and people everywhere. I don't know. You know, I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, I was watching some of the other artists, and people were just so like into it straight away, and you know, and you could tell like, okay, they might not necessarily know who that band is that they're watching. They're just, because you can see like some person's just kind of come from the peripheries, kind of joined in the crowd, and they're just like loving it, you know, and like they're just optimistic and just like embracing what's happening. And I'm like, maybe that's a festival thing, or is that a Prague thing? I don't know. A bit of both.
It's a Prague thing, I think. I've been coming here a long time, and that's part of the thing I love about it, is the fact of just the openness to artists and their music, and to listen, you know, because it's, as I said, without repeating myself, back in London, it can be a tough room, a lot of, you know, sort of folded arms, impress me kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, but you grew up in Chelmsford in Essex, so what was that like, sort of as a music community? Was there a music community? Yeah,
there was a really good music community in Chelmsford. I mean, you know, I make dance music essentially that's kind of hybridized. I come from a background of classical piano, so I've tried to like fuse both of those worlds, like the acoustic and the electronic. But Chelmsford in particular was important for me growing up. I worked, my first job I had was in a music shop, and actually had a bit of a similar atmosphere to this. It was like old school music shop. The guy that ran it was like smoking and playing clarinet and stuff all day, listening to like Miles Davis and John Coltrane sort of thing.
Fantastic.
So I was like given a good, you know, music education.
Yeah.
And I learned to play, you know, I actually played guitar before I played piano, and so I learned piano whilst I was working in the shop, and it was a good experience. But where I was, there was very strong dance music heritage. You know, for all different genres like UK garage and drum and bass. There's a lot of producers that were around my area, and there was a lot of nights, there was a lot of DJs. So I was, you know, 17, 18, and I was going to all these club nights, listening to all this new music for the very first time, and just being like blown away, like hearing, you know, house music properly for the first time. You know, I'd heard, like back at home growing up, I'd heard whatever might have been on the radio and stuff, and like the records that my dad would play, which was mainly kind of like disco and stuff, but to then hear like house music or whatever for the first time, or like Todd Edwards, like two-step garage and stuff like this, was, you know, it was interesting to me at the time. And it wasn't until a little bit later on where I sort of adopted like the idea of making this music myself. Initially it was more, I was kind of just like an observer, and I was taking a keen interest, but I was actually studying sort of classical music at the time, so
right.
It was like I was interested in it, but I had no like, oh, I could make this music. That didn't come into my head until a little bit later on. But yeah, and there's also a lot of producers, and you know, because Prodigy are like down the road from me, and they obviously spearheaded like that rave music, which was really important in that Chelmsford area and Braintree. There's a lot of like illegal raves happening in the early 90s, which I kind of took a little bit of inspiration from.
You were a little young for that, probably.
I was way too young, yeah, way too young. But
I went on a lot of them myself.
Did you really?
Like sort of, well, I'm from a rock background, but I used to live in a part of London, in Paddington. It was like really, there was these cool kids, and so they kind of adopted me. And then we would drive out to the M25 and just like circling around it, waiting for the call of where the rave was going to be. And then we'd end up in a field in the middle of nowhere. It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. And it was kind of like a, you know, sort of, what would you say, cat and mouse game with the police.
Yeah.
Because there was kind of a moral panic about it at the time, I remember. But we loved all of that.
Well, I've learned recently that the police, up until like, you know, now, like they could only have jurisdiction over their like particular county. So if they were in like, you know, Thetford or whatever, or Braintree or Chelmsford, like they couldn't have jurisdiction over the next town or the neighbouring like village or whatever. So there was like little loopholes where they could like, well let's just have it on this little border here, and then like, you know. But yeah, it's fascinating, because the thing that I take away from it mainly is the acceptance of everyone, like whatever race, gender, however people would identify. It was just like everyone was accepted. Doesn't matter what your job was, people were there to just have a good time, to experience the music, you know? And that was the important thing.
it was interesting. I mean, even Orbital got their name from that. You know, that's the M25, the circle.
Yeah.
That was because they were a massive part of the rave culture. But the thing that was amazing about it was there was never any trouble. Okay, there was drug taking. So what? You know, it's young people having fun, and I don't judge. And yeah, the whole thing of kind of being chased by the police was actually a lot of fun. Even though I think there was some more kind of darker stuff going on with the police in the sense, the fact they were trying to shut it down, even like on a government level, they brought in laws to try and, you know, to shut it down. Serious laws. People could go to jail for putting together a rave, you know, for people to dance to. I mean, it was madness when you think back to it, the amount of control they were trying to exert over young people. And, you know, but again, young people are going to rebel if they want to rebel. They're not going to put up with that nonsense.
Yeah, and people are always going to celebrate music and want to party and just like get together, the community that comes from that you can never stop that. Like, I mean, these raves, obviously they're happening in Essex and London and stuff, but they're happening everywhere. And they were, like, I mean, even, you know, you can go to Hamburg and you can go to a warehouse rave or party and have an incredible experience. So it is fascinating, like these little places that pop up where people just, you know, you just can't stop this energy from just kind of erupting. Yeah,
and we need that. You know, we need that in society, that energy to kind of bond youth together. They're having a hard enough time as it is. You know what I mean?
This is the thing about, you know, when the pandemic hit, that it took that away from everyone, didn't it, for a little while? And now people are just going nuts, aren't they? They're just like festivals are just, you know, everyone's just like, they're just itching to have a good time and to celebrate music again.
I think it would be hard if there was another pandemic for them to close things down like they did. I don't think people would.
People wouldn't buy it now.
They just wouldn't buy it again. No. I don't think. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think it was so damaging. I mean, we all have trauma from at one point, you know, one way or another. I mean, I kind of, it's like lost my cat at the time. I had to bring him to the vet, and I was seriously ill, and you know, I was very close to my cat, and they basically, you know, we had to hand them over to the vet in a car park. And, you know, while they were trying to sort him out, and they didn't, and he died. It was horrible. It was like really traumatizing. And then, you know, if we had family friends who died and we couldn't go to the funeral, it was just, I wouldn't accept that now. I would I'm going in with my cat to the vet. I don't care what happened.
And there's a lot of people that have had that, you know, those experiences. I'm sure everyone, like even listening to this podcast, like everyone probably has a friend or a family member that's had a similar experience where they've not been able to like reconcile with someone like a loved one, or they've not been able to just have that last moment that they wanted. And yeah, I think there's cynicism now like about that, and you know, there's a lack of trust in the government, which is where a lot of this like music and all these raves come from. It's kind of like a little bit of rebellion, isn't it? But yeah, it's just, you know, now just people just want to get together again, and it's great. It's good for creatives.
Yeah, I think like going back to the rave scene, it was that kind of sense of belonging. You know, it was a real sort of community. I think probably one of the last great sort of movements, musical movements. Maybe, do you think? What came after the rave scene that brought people together as much as that did?
It's a good question. I don't think there has been anything that's been quite as powerful as that. I spoke to a couple of different artists around that time. Like one was Sunscream, and there was another guy called Elysium, and they're both like kind of local to me, like from Whittam, Chelmsford, and that sort of area. And they were in it, you know, like they were there at the raves, performing, participating. And I asked that exact question. I said, has there been anything that's been this like powerful?
Yeah.
And they just like, no, like nothing's come close. Like the energy, the relationships that were formed, and just the music and all the
subgenres that's sort of, you know,
because it was all very new as well. There was just lots of things just being born, lots of, like you said, little subgenres that were coming out.
Yeah, like very exciting, very acid house, you know, techno, hardcore, you know, all these kind of different subgenres, which, you know, huge amount of that kind of permeated even into pop. You know what I mean? So it's a massive cultural impact. You know, really, that's what I mean as a kind of like punk had that kind of impact on music, but it didn't last probably as long as the rave scene, and it kind of went quiet for a while, and now all that kind of sound is back huge within pop. You know what I mean? It's kind of obviously the big corporations realize, okay, this works. Yeah, let's monetize it.
Yeah, that happens, doesn't it? Yeah, it does happen.
Well, they hijack it. So you're kind of living in Chelmsford. You've got siblings. Have you got brothers and sisters? Were they older, younger?
Yeah, I got brothers and sisters. I've got, one brother, two sisters. Brother, like, particularly musical and creative as well, so we got on really well.
What was he listening to?
He was listening to a lot of, like, the warp sound, like aphextwin, squarepusher, Boards of Canada, all that whole world. He was into that, like, really heavy, glitchy electronic music. And I was sort of more into, I was into that as well, but I was more into, like, Chicago house and the soulful stuff, and still am as well. But and then two sisters. My mum played piano and taught piano.
She taught you to play piano, didn't
she? She taught me to play the piano. Yeah, I had a lot of, like, arguments with her, like, so it was difficult for her to teach me. I think that's a pretty standard thing, like, a mum trying to teach their kid piano. Difficult. Like, there's a lot of, like, rebellion in that. Like, I was a very rebellious, like, kid as well, so I wanted to do the opposite of what anyone else was doing. So my mum trying to teach me, Beethoven or whatever, or, like, when I was like 8 years old, didn't go down very well. But then weirdly enough, like, when I got to 17, 18, I was really interested in Beethoven and then actually wanted to study properly. And then ended up doing all my grades and stuff like that, going through, like, the proper system and studying all those, like, great composers and the classics.
So when obviously your mum's into classical music, when you've sort of decided on the genre and you started making records or even just recordings, early days of your career, I mean, was she horrified or shocked, or would she have loved you to have done more classical music? My mum was very, very supportive of anything that I wanted to do musically. Never judged anything. Amazing. Never said that's a bit weird, or there was never anything like that. My dad also really supportive, but I do remember listening to Miles Davis, like, Bitches Brew, really loud in my bedroom. My dad, and I don't know if you're familiar with that record. Of course, I know.
It's pretty chaotic in places, and I was just obsessed with it. And my dad come into the room and he was just like, you could just see in his face, he was just like, I don't even know what to say to this, just like, this isn't music, son, like, and just walked straight out again. He didn't even have to say anything. I could just tell he was just like, he that wasn't for him. He was like, I mean, he's got a really good musical palette as well. Like, there's a line, like, my dad, like, doesn't cross that line into chaos, whereas I like to, like, go into that world of chaos a little bit more than he does. But no, like, super supportive parents. Very lucky. Oh, and there was drums in the house, like, both me and my brother. Amazing. Always, like, playing drums as loud as we possibly could, and never was like, my dad or mum would never be like, shut up. There was nothing like that. So it was just chaos. Pianos in every room, organs.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
I mean, we had, like, a little old Farfisa organ that I was obsessed with. I would just spend hours and hours, like, with the little presets on the little rumba, like, beats or whatever, or, like, waltz, salsa, and then just playing these weird little organ patches and stuff like that.
Wow.
But it was cool because that was a tactile experience, being able to, like, twist knobs and press buttons. That was, in a way, like, it was an early form of producing. Mm-hmm. So it was, without really thinking about it, you're starting to figure out the mechanics of these, like, wonderful instruments, and then that carries on into your producing later on.
So were you working with any other musicians in Chelmsford at the time?
Sure, yeah. I was. There was. I mean, if you played music, you knew everyone, like, that played music. And so there was, like, two venues as well. There was the Y Club and another place called the Army and Navy, which I think. The Y Club is still there, but the Army and Navy sadly is now, like, a travel lodge or, like, a Wagamama's or something like that. I don't know, but it was a community hub. So you knew about every band that was playing, and it was when I was around that time, I can't remember what year it would have been, but it was very much two separate worlds. It was like you were either into guitar music or you were into like drum and bass.
Sure.
And so for me, it's difficult to explain to someone now, like a young person now, because music's very homogenized. But back, like when I was growing up, it was very distinct genres in a way. Like it was like if you were into guitar music, you were into guitar music, and you know, whereas, or you know, like Britpop, for example, like it was all about guitars, right, and songwriting, and I love all that stuff. I love all that music as well. But you would never think about merging the two worlds, so to speak. Like whereas now, where is any genre? Like it's everything's kind of merges into one, doesn't it? And there's good and bad that comes from that, I think. But yeah, so
I think that might come from the technology as well, because like everybody's got a laptop with some software on it. You can create recordings. It's fun, and you know, whereas back in the day it was difficult to do that. You know, and you had to go into proper studios. So okay, you could get in a band, but it was still difficult. You know, it's so easy now to put sounds together. So
absolutely.
It lends itself much more to experimenting.
I also think that like being in a band in say the 90s, whether that's, I don't know, Blur or Oasis, like you could be very, very good at one single element or something. Once you could craft something. So say you were a guitarist, you could spend your entire waking existence playing guitar, practicing the guitar, getting great at the guitar and not worrying about anything else.
Right.
Whereas now it's a little bit different, because if you play guitar, that's great, but what else can you do? Because that's not going to be enough a lot of the time. You've got to be able to produce content for social media. You've also got to maybe like sing, produce, record your own stuff. So, you know, I think you've got to wear a lot more hats, so to speak, now than you did maybe back, you know, if you were in like Graham Coxon or whatever in Blur. Like I've heard him talk in interviews where he's just talking about, you know, just playing guitar in his bedroom, and that Blur just felt like an extension of that in a way. And it's only recently that Graham Coxon started like producing, you know, because he did like that TV program, The End of the Fucking World, which is a really good show. I think it's on Netflix. And he did all the music for that, and that was like one of the first ventures of him actually like going into the world of recording and producing, which is crazy to think about. Like someone like him, incredible musician and guitarist.
When you were starting out, you didn't really, it wasn't your real ambition to be successful as an artist, really. You loved music, but you kind of evolved into that, didn't you? You were teaching kids how to play piano and working in a music store. You didn't have this kind of burning ambition to be a star early on.
Not really, and I still don't, to be honest. Like I was very happy just having music was just a part of who I was, and there was no like objective to that. It was just I wanted to be around music all the time. I wanted to play the piano, I wanted to play guitar, I wanted to play the drums, I wanted to be around other people that wanted to do that as well, and like-minded people. I was always interested in recording, and you know, what goes into making a record and listening to albums and all that sort of stuff. But I'd never really considered myself, I'm going to be an artist. It was just like happened by accident, really. But yeah, I always knew that I was into music. But yeah, it wasn't until this project, Model Man, where, you know, I actually felt like, oh, maybe I've got something to say, because it dawned upon me that, okay, I've come from this like classical piano background, but I'm also really into dance music. Like, what would happen if like I actually merged those two worlds and tried to do something with that? And so that was when Model Man came about, and then it was like, okay, right, well, I guess I'm an artist now.
And where did the name Model Man come from? It's an unusual name.
So the Model Man name is an interesting one, because it actually comes from partly to do with how I was raised, which was Christian. So I was sort of raised quite religious.
I was too. Well, I'm Irish Catholic, you know, there's no escaping that one.
Yeah. And there was a lot of like pressures that come with that, and a lot of like expectations, and I think I was probably not a very confident young man, and so I didn't really know, probably lacked a little bit of direction in terms of like career ambition and like life ambition and direction. So I think I ended up thinking that there was an ideal thing that I needed to be, and I think when you're raised Christian, some of those things might be, and I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, but some of those things might be like being a good husband, having a family, having kids, and like meeting certain expectations, even if they're not said. Like it's like it was in my imagination that I had to maybe like appease my parents and appease like the church that I was going to and all these sort of things. And then like, so for me, model man was like the kind of rejection of in that sense. It was like, okay, actually, well, the model man, it doesn't exist. Like that is, the model man is like whatever you want it to be, whatever, is in your heart and whatever, you resonate with. And for me, that was just being myself and like making the music that I wanted to make, like unashamedly and unapologetically, and just kind of doing my thing and being fine with that, If
you were like sort of to talk back to your younger self, like as a kid who was obviously stressing about it and being sort of through a certain amount of trauma, what would you say to your younger self now if you were to have a conversation?
Good question. I would say don't listen to anyone, as strange as that said, because obviously like there's a lot to be said for a great mentor, and I'm sure, well, I know that I've had like people in my life that have influenced me for the good, but I've also had like negative influences and people that have maybe had their idea of what I should be. And I would just say to myself, like, ignore everyone and go with what is in your gut, what's in your heart, and like don't worry about, failure as well. Just go for it, do your thing, and not worry about what people think.
Well, obviously we met through Christian Wright, great friend of both of ours. So was he one of the first people to really believe in you and kind of think you can take this to the next level, loved your music? Was he the kind of, or was there managers before that, or how did that evolve?
Yeah, no, he's my first and only manager. So basically, Christian had sort of dipped his foot in management, and he's always been in the music industry, works at Abbey Road, like
probably one of the top 10 mastering engineers in the world. One of the great
mastering engineers at the moment, and has learnt his trade, like worked his way right from the ground up, like pretty much as like a T-boy, learned like from the best, and has been there I think for like 20 years now, maybe it could be even more. But so anyway, but close friend, like again, like if you're in Chelmsford and you're into music, each other, and so we'd been to the same club nights, like he'd I'd been to the same house parties. He'd put on loads of house parties that I'd been to, and just got to know him. And so I started making these tunes, and I sort of I was like, I think these are really good, but I should probably like send to some friends and see what they think. Sure. And Christian was just was one of those people, like a few people that was on the list that I felt like comfortable to send to and know that I would get like an honest review, because sometimes you might have people in your life that will just say it's a bit of an echo chamber, or exactly, So I knew that Christian would give it to me straight, like if this was shit. And he was just like, this is really good. And I was like, oh, thanks, man, that I appreciate that. And that was it. I didn't think anything of it. And then like 6 months like rolled by, and he was like, do you want to come down to Abbey Road just to hang out? So I've got a couple of friends that I've played like some of your tunes to. He's like, I'd love for you to meet like a couple of these guys. And so I ended up like going down to Abbey Road, and of course like it's a great experience being at Abbey Road. Like you're looking around like this historic location, these really amazing recording studios, and I'm lucky that I've got a friend that's invited me down, so I'm sort of hanging out at like this iconic venue. And he's like, let's listen to that track, and he's got like a few people down that I'm meeting at this, and I'm like, what's going on here? And he's like, before I know it, I'm getting like offered a record deal by like some guy that's like in the room that started this label, Mahogany Records. So there's this guy called Mark Murdoch.
Yeah, I know Mark.
Who's absolutely like lovely guy, and he's just starting this label. So he's already got this really successful YouTube channel called Mahogany Sessions, where they have all these amazing artists that are singing like stripped back versions of their songs. Sometimes it will just be piano, sometimes it will just be guitar, but mainly guitar and voice and stuff. But anyway, so he's like, look, I'm starting this label and I'd love to put out some of your music. So I'm like, okay, cool. And then before I know it, like I've got a deal and I've got a manager, like without like really like thinking about anything. So yeah, very, very naive time really, because it was just going with the flow, didn't overthink anything, and just lucky that I had just a couple of the right people surrounding me. And so put out a few songs and a couple of EPs that did really well. So the first one was called City Songs, and the idea was that my brother and I would like travel the world and go to different locations and find samples that were specific to the region. So we went to Delhi and Taiwan and London as well. Like and makes individual songs based on these environments. And so that was the idea, and we did videos to accompany each of these songs. And so that was the first thing that we did, and it was really successful. And you know, we were really pleased with our work, and then it kind of just went on from there. So you're just
recording sound bits like the city and anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
I do it here. Funny enough, in Prague, there's a nature reserve, and I was walking. There's a long stream that you won't meet anybody for like an hour sometimes walking. You just walk along the stream and I get my voice and just record it on my phone, the whole stream, like from one end to the other, like about 30 minutes. And then if I'm trying to sleep at night, I put it on. It's the real stream that I was kind of walking by earlier on in the day.
Very soothing sound, isn't that the stream?
But I love that they used to use that a lot in drum and bass back in the day, that ambience in the background, just like so low in the mix, you know, that kind of thing.
I like to use a lot of that, like just for better sound. But it's also, in a way, it's kind of like a musical journal, you know, just collecting sounds of places that you've been. Sometimes I love like hearing people's conversations as well. Like I try it, and you know, if I'm on like the train or, you know, just walking around the city or like outside of a club, like I try and record as much as I can and just get little things. And I mean, there's just like you'll hear all sorts in my records. Like there's just all sorts of little snippets of things that have gone on, and like now when I listen back to it, it's nostalgic for me, because it's like, oh, I remember that night, like that little sound is there. That was when I was in Berlin or whatever, or like that was when I was in like London or Paris or whatever, you know. So it's nice to get those little things in your music.
So your music is quite cinematic. I mean, are you into movies? Because when I listen to it, I kind of see that template. It's kind of more of it's ambient, but it's cinematic and it's exciting, and it's kind of mainly for the most part, melancholic, which resonates with me because, you know, I'm Irish. We love a bit of melancholy, you know. Can't help ourselves. Weep at the sight of an uilleann pipe, you know what I mean? But it's just part of how we are. But I kind of hear that in your music. There's a lot of kind of minor chords, and so that melancholic kind of feeling, sort of mysterious kind of sound, the ambient side maybe of house.
Absolutely, yeah. I live for that. I live for that melancholy. It's, you know, life is bittersweet, isn't it? And I wanted to have find the sweet spot there, like between some uplifting element, like I like a little bit of euphoria, but also the sadness, like that life like brings.
Reality,
yeah. And you know, I don't think I overthink that. I think it's just probably who I am, and that just sort of comes out in my music. But yeah, no, definitely. And I love film, and film has always been a big influence. You know, I grew up like watching Stanley Kubrick, and you know, so just I used to actually play piano to his films. So like I remember like watching 2001 Space Odyssey, and then like, because obviously the music in that is incredible. It's like Strauss and like, or you know, like what an incredible like creative decision to pair like that film with all those like great like classical pieces. But I used to like try and work out some of those pieces, but then in between, you know, in different shots, I would just play my own little things and stuff. So that was probably like where some of that cinematic thing comes from. And
maybe even the Enniomorricone or Bernard Herrmann, were you listening to any of that?
All of it, yeah, all of the above. Yeah, I was just into everything.
Because that like even just had a huge impact on me. Like Bernard Herrmann, the way he kind of took elements out of the orchestra and used them in a completely different way that had ever been done before, where they always had the whole orchestra going all of the time, or he would take odd pieces of the orchestra out and put them together where they weren't put together before when he was working with Hitchcock. I mean, that was the kind of start of all of that, like Psycho and all. And even what I think I admire him the most for is the Birds, where he didn't use any music. There was no composition.
I know. It's amazing. It's amazing.
He said to Hitchcock, showed him the film, and he said, "This doesn't need any music." And it's brilliant. It really
it's brilliant,
works.
Isn't it? There's like the other one, going back again to Stanley Kubrick, like Eyes Wide Shut is similar to that. There's like 2 piano notes that just go throughout the whole film, da, 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 da. And it's so eerie because that's all there is. There's not much music in it, so I think that's an interesting like one to do as well. But and
Enniomorricone, sort of like Cinema Paradiso, and that kind of again the sadness in the music. That just moves me every time. I mean, every time I see that movie, the end, the kind of the sweeping strings, it's just magical.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with an orchestra as well. And I think like Johnny Greenwood, in more recent times, has really explored what you can do with acoustic sounds. And, like There Will Be Blood is like one of his iconic film scores, and the music in that is incredible. And he's doing a lot of percussive stuff with the strings, where he's getting like the cellist to be like hitting the cabinet of like the cello and things like that, or the body of the cello, should I say. But really like innovative ways of, and that was quite inspiring to me as well, because I think sometimes we think of electronic as like synthesized sounds, but actually, like, to me, a lot of what is fascinating about electronic music, and some of the electronic music that I'm into, is more taking acoustic sounds and processing and manipulating them.
Right.
So like less maybe synthesized sounds, but more sort of taking found sounds like samples, like whether that's like the river or things like that, and then maybe like pitching them in a strange way that makes them sound more ghostly or more eerie or less, like the way that we hear them in the human ear. But all that stuff's interesting. Because
it is because of all, like, obviously not getting too technical here, but you can get all these sample sets now and everything's become very homogenized. You can go on Splice and everything's there and just take stuff. But it does, as I said, homogenize and kind of neutralize so much music for me, and not in a good way. I think, like the old days, you did have to really search for samples and find them and kind of process them. And for me, I think it's a better way forward to be creatively new. You know what I mean? Like all those sample sets, you get Apple, get Logic now, and it's got thousands of sounds, and everybody's got them.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's why it's important to make a lot of my own sounds and to do what's like close to me as well, and to kind of put my identity into it, because I want to try and create my own little world. That's what I guess any good artist wants to do, right? They want to create their own identity, and part of that is trying to find my own sounds and sort and I play a lot of piano as well on my stuff, and try and play as many instruments as I can, even if I am affecting them like quite and processing stuff. I do, that's important for me. I mean, it's whatever works for you. I mean, a lot of people can open a sample pack, and I think the one thing about having a sample pack or opening these things is that it for a lot of new producers, it's probably like their closest way of playing with a band, because they're having to, they're reacting to something. Like it's like, what's that? Like, and then they're reacting to it and like making it into their own. But I think it's interesting though, because I think it's harder to be in a band nowadays, and I think that's why there is probably like more producers than there ever has been, because it's easy to make music on your laptop or even your phone. But I do miss the band thing, like the
interaction with the human beings.
Yeah, and I still like to play with musicians now, like even though I'm making music on my own essentially, like, and in a very introverted way a lot of the time, like I still play with musicians. I'll play guitar, or like any opportunity that I can to play with. Like I've got like a couple of my closest friends are drummers, and I'll get together and play drums, and I've actually put on a live show where I've had a real drummer and a guy playing vocal samples. So he's got like a little like sampler, and he's playing them in real time. So it feels like he's like almost singing the vocals because he's affecting them and playing them, and you know, they're not quantized or anything. So it's like you're playing them in a very organic way. So yeah, I like that world. I'm fascinated by that. Like I love like people sort of sometimes are surprised because like, what music are you into? And then and first and foremost I'll be sort of saying like Nirvana or whatever, or like, you know, Beastie Boys, and then I'll start talking about dance music. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in bands and the history of music as well.
So is there anything around at the moment that excites you, that you've heard recently in the last, say, year or so, that you think this floats my boat?
There's loads of so much good stuff at the moment. There's lots of bands. There's a band called Porridge, are really cool. I really like those. You're putting me on the spot. There's just so much. Like in terms of like electronic music, you know, I like Lawrence Guy, Barry Can't Swim. I you know, a lot of you know, Salute is another one, is really good. But yeah, I mean, there's just lots of good music at the moment. It's hard to sort of say like specifically one thing over another. But yeah, lots. I
mean, that's the thing now, though, isn't it? There is so much music. You know, it's huge amounts of music. Like back in the day, there was a kind of, for better or worse, there was a kind of a filtering system, you know, kind of. But now, I think there's over 100,000 tracks a day going up on Spotify, even more than that.
Yeah, and it's overwhelming for someone like me, because I actually like to spend time on one artist. So it's like, if I'm listening to whoever it is, I'll like listen to their whole back catalogue. And just go through every single song, listen to all their albums. What are they trying to tell me? Like, what's their story? What's their message? What's their concepts? Like, album, you know, in terms of like this album, like how did it come about? Like, I'm interested in that, so I'll just explore. So I'm probably not the best for like, I don't really listen to playlists. Like, I'm still a little bit old school in that way, that I like listening to albums. I like, you know, looking at the artwork and looking at the artist's journey, like how did they get here, and what did they do before this? Were they in a band? Like, did they have another profile name? Like, have they got another pseudonym? Like, whatever it is, like, I'm interested in the whole thing. So I'll just like magnifying glass that and just zoom in, you know, into their whole world.
I think that's what's good about dance music generally. Like, say, instead of the pop sort of genre, in the sense, like with pop now, they want you to get to the chorus literally within seconds. You know what I mean? There's no intro anymore.
No.
They don't do intros because they want, you know, people to stay clicking, you know, on the playlists. But I think it's a real shame. You know, the journey musically is really getting condensed to sort of ridiculous amount. It is strange. It is
very strange. I think we're actually in a very, very pivotal point in time. I think this is probably the biggest change in terms of how songs are made and written, probably that there's been since the Beatles. You know, I think you're absolutely right. Like, if you go on a playlist on Spotify, like, the songs are probably averaging about 3 minutes. Whereas like in maybe the early 2000s or the 90s or the 80s, they're probably averaging more like 4 minutes, or maybe a little bit less. Like, I'm sure I know that there were still edits, you know, back then as well. But like, who was it that the other day I was listening, someone was like, oh, check out like Ice Spice, like her song duration, like, and it was like, I was like, are these like snippets or something? Because the songs were clocking in at like 1 minute 52.
Yeah, 2 minutes is often regular now. Yeah, 2 minutes sometimes.
I was like, is this the full song? I thought it was like, I was like looking on her Spotify profile page, and it was like every song was falling around 2 minutes, and it was like this eye-opening kind of moment in a way, because it was like, oh, is this the generation of like TikTok and
lack of patience?
Like, just like, it's like there's one motif and that's it, and you know, I mean, some of it's really cool, like it's really good, but it's like it's mutated now. The music form has mutated a bit. People are not, you don't hear bridges. Like,
exactly.
You're hearing a motif, you're hearing a chorus straight away a lot of the time as well. You're hearing like one single element that's like repeated over and over again, or maybe like there's a little variation or whatever. But that seems to be like a theme that's happening, and it'll be interesting to see. Like, will we come out of that again, and will there, you know, will people get bored of that? Yeah, will there be like a kickback and backlash? But I mean, is it? I'm not saying it's good or bad. It's just that's just how it's evolved. That's where we're at. Like and that is definitely a product of streaming and social media for sure. Because like a TikTok or like an Instagram reel, I think it has to clock. I don't know. I mean, it changes all the time, doesn't it? But I think it has to clock in under a minute. So if you're making a video, for example, like, and you're trying to draw people in, you've basically so I've done this recently where I've like, okay, I'm gonna create a reel out of like I'm releasing a single or whatever, or I've got a song that I want to promote or whatever. So I'll do like a live performance, but I'll need to condense like some elements of that song. So sometimes I'll make a specific live version that is like very quick to the mark, like quick off the mark, like so it will have like the idea, and then it will go into like the vocal melody or whatever quicker than it has done on the record like that I've released. But I mean it's a weird one, because I guess I haven't really subscribed to it entirely, because I'm still making like 6-minute songs and stuff, sending them to like my manager, and he's like, yeah, we might have to make an edit of this, but yeah. But it's weird, because if you make an edit, then you're splitting you're having 2 songs. Yeah, sure. And so you're splitting your streams. Right. So like, so you might have an edit of your single, but then you've got like the long version of it that might be getting less streams, because that's not the one that's getting pushed to the audience and to the playlists and stuff. So then you've got this, you're conflicted, because you're like, on the one hand, you know, you want your figures to be up and you want people to hear your music, but then also you don't want to compromise your art and your vision for your music. So you're having to make that is in the back of your mind a little bit. And so you do have to consider those things, and I don't know what the right answer is. It's tiresome though. It's very tiresome. Yeah, it is, because you don't want to be thinking about all that stuff. But at the same time, like artists have had to deal with this for generations, ever since radio. You have to make the 3-minute single for radio. Yeah, exactly. So it's, in that sense, it's nothing new, but it's it's interesting. Catch. Yeah, I've got a plane to catch. So we've got to get you back to London, stuck into a car and whiz you back to Prague airport. But it's been amazing, Mark. Thank you so much for doing the podcast. It's like, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of hearing it back. And we'll have to get you back to dopeYEAH to do a show at some point, because you've seen the venue down the other part of the kind of place here. It's amazing. So you'll have to come over and play, and maybe bring some collabs with you as well, and we'll make a proper night of it. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you, Mark. Cheers. Brilliant. Pleasure, man.